If you had asked me a month ago, I would have told you my marriage was rock solid. Rachel and I had been together for over 12 years, and in that time, I had come to believe she was the most dependable person in my life. While I worked long hours for the government, and sometimes disappeared for days on classified assignments, she ran the house like a well-oiled machine. Bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, laundry folded, and the home always smelled faintly of her favorite vanilla candles when I returned. David, my best friend since college, was practically family. He'd stop by to help Rachel with small repairs when I was away, share a drink with me on weekends, and was the godfather to our niece. I never once suspected anything. But looking back now, I can see the first cracks forming, little things that didn't make sense at the time. Rachel started asking a lot more about my travel schedule, pressing for exact departure and return times. She insisted on handling all our finances alone, saying it was easier for her to manage the bills without me micromanaging. There were also the calls she'd step outside to take, claiming they were from her sister, yet whenever I happened to walk near the door, her tone would shift to something softer, almost playful. At the time, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe she needed space. Maybe I was overthinking it. But in truth, those were the early signs that my life was about to be turned upside down. My last work trip wasn't supposed to end early. I was scheduled to be in another city for 4 more days, buried in meetings that would keep me away from home. But a sudden cancellation meant I could fly back and surprise Rachel. I still remember the giddy feeling I had on the flight, picturing her smile when she opened the door, the way she'd wrap her arms around me, maybe the two of us going out for dinner. It had been months since we'd had any real quality time, and I thought a surprise visit would bring back some of the spark we'd lost. When my cab pulled up to our street, I noticed something odd right away. The neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, were standing at the end of their driveway, whispering with concerned expressions. I waved, but instead of waving back, Mrs. Hughes looked away quickly. That was strange. As I walked toward my front door, my excitement turned to confusion. Bright yellow police tape stretched across the entryway. My stomach dropped. I rushed up to the porch, only to realize my key wouldn't fit the lock anymore. My mind raced. Had there been a break-in? Was Rachel hurt? Before I could piece it together, a uniformed officer stepped out from inside, holding a clipboard. "Sir, can I help you?" he asked, eyeing me like I didn't belong there. "This is my house," I said, voice tight. "Where's my wife?" The officer flipped through his notes. "There's been a reported incident of a possible kidnapping. A call came in 2 days ago from an anonymous source, claiming to be a neighbor, saying they saw suspicious activity. No suspects. No confirmed victim recovery." I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. A kidnapping? Rachel? None of it made sense. I pushed past him into the house, or what used to be our house. It was empty. Not just messy, empty. I mean stripped bare. The sofa was gone, the TV gone, even the curtains had been taken down. The shelves were bare except for a lone coffee mug, my coffee mug, sitting in the middle of the kitchen counter like some sick joke. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The screen loaded, and my worst fear was confirmed. Every single account was drained. Checking. Savings. Even my retirement fund. Zeros across the board. That's when I noticed the scuff marks on the floor, wide, parallel streaks, like furniture had been dragged out. The so-called crime scene looked a lot more like a moving day. I stepped outside, numb, and that's when Mr. Hughes approached. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking. "Mark. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but 3 days ago, I saw David here. He was loading boxes into a moving truck with Rachel. I thought you knew." My ears rang. I must have stood there for a full minute, frozen, before I realized my entire life had just been rewritten. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was a vanishing act. And the worst part? It looked like everyone but me already knew. I barely slept that night. I sat on the edge of my bed in a cheap motel room, staring at my phone, cycling between calling Rachel's number and refreshing my bank account like maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up and it would all be a glitch. But her phone went straight to voicemail every time. No texts. No explanations. No trace. At 6 a.m., I drove back to the house, or what used to be the house, and parked across the street. I needed answers, and if the cops weren't going to get them, I damn well would. That's when I noticed the crime scene tape was gone. The door was wide open, and inside, a team of cleaners was already scrubbing the place down. The officer from yesterday was nowhere in sight. I stepped inside and asked the lead cleaner what had happened. She shrugged. Some lady came by late last night, said she was the homeowner and the situation was a misunderstanding. Paid us cash to get it ready for sale. Real urgent about it. Did she leave a name? I asked, though I already knew. The cleaner smirked. Rachel. I felt my stomach turn. By noon, I'd managed to get through to one of Rachel's cousins on Facebook Messenger. She hesitated at first, but after I told her what happened, she cracked. Rachel wasn't kidnapped. She had been planning this for months. The anonymous neighbor call to the police planted the signs of a struggle inside the house. Staged. And then came the real gut punch. Rachel wasn't alone. She'd left with David, my best friend, and they'd been quietly selling off our stuff for weeks while I was away. The moving truck my neighbor saw was the final step before they staged the fake kidnapping to cover their tracks. It made perfect, horrible sense. The police investigation had been half-hearted at best because there was no evidence of an actual crime, not a real one, anyway. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mark, her voice came through the line, calm and almost bored. You must be piecing it together by now. I could barely speak. Why? Why the hell would you do this? She laughed softly, like I'd just asked why the sky was blue. Because you made it too easy. Always gone. Always trusting. You handed me the keys to the castle and expected me not to walk out with the crown. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. And David? Oh, David's been there for me in ways you never could, she said, her tone laced with venom. This isn't personal, Mark. It's just life. You were comfortable, predictable. I wanted more. And then she hung up. I stared at the dead screen, shaking with rage. It wasn't just betrayal. It was mockery. And in that moment, I knew, she'd planned every word of that call to twist the knife just a little deeper. After Rachel's call, I sat in my car for what felt like hours, replaying every moment of the last few months like a movie I'd been too stupid to watch closely the first time. The little hints were there, they'd always been there, but I'd ignored them, choosing to believe in the version of her I'd married instead of the woman she'd become. I couldn't let it end with her smug voice echoing in my head. If she thought she could rob me blind, run off with my best friend, and live happily ever after, she had another thing coming. The first thread I pulled was David. I still had his number saved, and though every instinct told me not to, I dialed it. Straight to voicemail. No surprise there. But then I checked my email. Buried in my spam folder was a notification from a shared travel rewards account we'd opened years ago when we all took a trip to Mexico together. 2 first-class tickets had been booked under David's account. Destination, Lisbon, Portugal. Departure date, 3 days from now. My pulse kicked up. I screenshotted everything. Then I dug deeper. Rachel's name popped up on a rental agreement for a short-term luxury apartment in a Lisbon district known for its expats. Paid in full for 6 months, with my money. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was financial, strategic. This wasn't some whirlwind romantic escape. It was an operation. By evening, I had also discovered something else. David had been selling my old sports memorabilia online. One listing caught my eye, a signed rookie jersey from my late father. That one made my blood boil more than the drained bank accounts ever could. I was about to close my laptop when another notification came through. An email from Rachel. No subject line, just a blank body with one attachment, a selfie of her and David on a beach somewhere, sunglasses on, wine glasses in hand. She was smirking, that same smug smirk she probably wore when she drained our accounts, and holding up a sign that read, "Stop chasing ghosts. You'll never catch us." I sat back, the weight of it all pressing down on me. She wasn't hiding. She wanted me to know exactly where I stood, powerless, gutted, and humiliated. But here's the thing Rachel didn't count on: my work for the government had taught me patience, planning, and how to follow a trail that someone doesn't want found. And now, I wasn't just a husband she'd wronged. I was a man with nothing left to lose. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the dark of my motel room with the glow of my laptop screen painting my face, combing through every scrap of data I could find on Rachel and David. I wasn't just scrolling, I was hunting. People think vanishing is easy. It's not. Everyone leaves a trail, especially in the digital age. Even amateurs like Rachel and David. I started with their social media. Rachel had deleted her accounts, but David's Instagram was still active, albeit quiet. No new posts in weeks. Still, I pulled old photos and ran them through a reverse image search. That's when I found a recent repost on a travel blog's feed, David, blurry in the background of a shot taken in a Lisbon cafe. Posted just 3 days ago. I dug further. Checked the metadata of the picture Rachel had emailed me. Amateurs never scrub the EXIF data. GPS coordinates lit up like a beacon, a luxury beachfront property in Cascais, west of Lisbon. The exact place they were hiding. I felt a rush, not joy, but a cold, calculated satisfaction. This was more than betrayal now. This was war. Still, I wasn't stupid. I needed proof of what they'd done, the staged kidnapping, the theft, before I could make any move. I knew the second I involved law enforcement, Rachel would twist the narrative, painting herself as the victim. She'd always been good at flipping the script. So I called in a favor. An old contact from my government days, someone who owed me more than one. I told him I needed a discreet background pull, flight manifests, rental agreements, financial trails. Within hours, I had everything: the fake neighbor 911 call traced to a burner phone bought with cash by David, the moving truck rental under Rachel's maiden name, and, the cherry on top, bank transfers from my accounts to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, both their names on it. But even with all that, I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to confront them face to face, to see their smug expressions crumble when they realized I wasn't the gullible idiot they thought I was. By 3 a.m. I had booked my own ticket to Lisbon. One way. No checked luggage. Just a carry-on and a folder of evidence. As I zipped my bag, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like the same man who had stepped off that plane a few days ago expecting a warm welcome home. I looked like someone who had been burned to ash, and was ready to walk through fire to get even. Lisbon in late summer is beautiful in the way that almost makes you forget why you're there. Warm air scented with salt, narrow streets winding up sunlit hills, the sound of distant fado music bleeding from open windows. But for me, it all felt like camouflage, a bright, postcard-perfect cover for something rotten underneath. I landed at Humberto Delgado Airport just after sunrise. No fanfare, no checked bags. My phone was off, my credit cards tucked away. I didn't want to leave any trail they could sniff out if they got spooked. My first stop wasn't the address from the photo metadata. I went to a small cafe across the street from their building in Cascais. The place had a perfect view of the entrance. I ordered a coffee I didn't drink and waited. At 10:14 a.m. they appeared. Rachel was wearing oversized sunglasses and a flowing white dress, the kind she used to wear on our vacations. Her hand was hooked around David's arm like they were the cover couple for a travel magazine. He was carrying 2 shopping bags, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Seeing them together like that was worse than any photo. It was the ease of it, the casualness, like they'd been living this life for years, not days. I had to force my grip to relax on the coffee cup before I cracked it. I tailed them for the next 2 days. Not close enough to be obvious, but close enough to learn their patterns. Morning walks to the market. Afternoons by the marina. Late dinners at the same seafood restaurant where the waiter greeted them like old friends. It was almost insulting, how unafraid they were. They had no idea I was here. On the 3rd day, I made my move. I struck up a conversation with a young woman who worked at their building's front desk, nothing aggressive, just casual. She mentioned, offhand, that they were renting under fake names but paying in cash. A red flag for anyone, but for me, it was a goldmine. That night, sitting in my rented flat a few blocks away, I laid everything out, photos, timelines, receipts. I wasn't ready to go to the authorities yet. Not until I had the kind of undeniable proof that even Rachel's manipulative tongue couldn't talk away. So I decided to take it further. The next morning, I'd find a way inside their apartment. Not to confront them, not yet, but to see exactly what they were hiding and, more importantly, what they'd taken from me. And as I sat there in the dim light, staring at their smiling faces on my laptop screen, I realized something. I wasn't just chasing them anymore. I was hunting them. Breaking into their place wasn't about smashing a lock or kicking down a door, that's amateur hour. This was about timing, patience, and knowing that Rachel and David were creatures of habit. I'd been watching them for 3 days, and on the 4th morning, they stuck to their routine, market run at 9:30 a.m. Then a slow stroll along the marina. That gave me a 90-minute window. I slipped into the building like I belonged there. A nod to the front desk attendant, my hand casually carrying a folded newspaper, sunglasses hiding my eyes. She didn't even glance twice. When I reached their floor, I didn't knock. I pulled out a small lock-picking set, a gift from my government days, and in less than 30 seconds, I was inside. The air in the apartment hit me first, Rachel's perfume, the same floral scent she used to wear at home, mingled with the faint saltiness of the ocean breeze drifting through open balcony doors. It was like stepping into a twisted version of my own past. The place was immaculate, staged almost like a luxury rental listing. White curtains, polished floors, designer furniture. But I wasn't here for the decor. I started with the bedroom. That's where I found the first punch to the gut, my father's signed rookie jersey, neatly framed on the wall above their bed like a trophy. On the dresser sat a watch I'd bought Rachel for our anniversary, next to a pair of gold cufflinks I'd inherited from my grandfather. She hadn't sold everything. Some things she'd kept, as if to remind herself of what she'd taken from me. I moved to the living room, rifling through drawers. A stack of passports caught my eye. All real, all with their photos, but under different names. This wasn't just a romantic escape. This was a long-term plan to disappear completely. Then I found it, a sleek black folder tucked behind a stack of travel magazines. Inside were printed emails between Rachel and David, dating back over a year. Plans for the staged kidnapping. Lists of assets to liquidate. Even a mock police report template she drafted to use in case I came looking too hard. But the worst was the last page, a detailed breakdown of my travel schedule, annotated with notes on the best times to extract the rest of my belongings. My life, mapped out like a military operation. I was shoving the folder into my bag when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart slammed in my chest. Too early. I ducked into the bathroom just as the door unlocked. Their voices filled the space. "I told you, Mark's not going to find us." Rachel's voice was lazy, almost amused. David chuckled. And if he does? She laughed. Then I'll finish the job. I gripped the folder tighter. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a threat. And now, I had proof. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it over their voices. The bathroom was small, the kind where your back brushes the sink if you lean too far against the door. I held my breath, straining to catch every word. Rachel's heels clicked across the hardwood as she moved deeper into the apartment. David's heavier footsteps followed. They sounded relaxed, comfortable, the way people do when they believe they're untouchable. I risked a slow glance through the narrow crack where the bathroom door didn't quite seal. David was setting the grocery bags on the counter, pulling out a bottle of wine, while Rachel tossed her sunglasses onto the couch. She had that same smirk I'd seen in the beach photo, like life was one long, private joke she was in on and I wasn't. Then she said something that nearly made me step out right then and there. If he's stupid enough to come here, we'll make him regret it. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay still. The folder in my bag suddenly felt heavier. I'd already risked too much being here, but I knew one wrong move now and this wouldn't just be about stolen money anymore. They stayed inside longer than I expected. 10 minutes. 15. My legs started to ache from crouching. Then, mercifully, Rachel's voice floated from the living room. Let's get some sun before the marina gets crowded. The sound of the door closing was like a release valve in my chest. I counted to 30, then slowly emerged from the bathroom. My eyes darted around to make sure I hadn't left anything out of place. I needed them to believe they were still safe, at least until I made my move. I slipped out into the hallway and took the stairs instead of the elevator, exiting through a side door that led into a quiet alley. My pulse didn't slow until I was 3 blocks away, weaving into the crowd of tourists. Back in my rented flat, I spread the contents of the folder across the table. The evidence was damning: staged kidnapping plans, fake identities, bank transfer records. Enough to crush their little paradise and drag them into the kind of legal nightmare they couldn't charm their way out of. But there was still the problem of getting it in front of the right people without Rachel twisting it against me. I'd seen her manipulate family, friends, even cops in the past, and she was good. Too good. Which meant my next move had to be as precise as it was ruthless. I wasn't going to just report them. I was going to dismantle their entire escape plan. It wasn't enough to ruin their little beachside love nest. I needed to destroy the foundation they'd built it on, the money, the fake identities, the safety net they thought would keep them untouchable. If I went straight to the Portuguese police or even Interpol, there was still a chance Rachel could spin it as a misunderstanding or worse, accuse me of stalking and harassment. With no witnesses and her crocodile tears, she could turn the tables. So instead, I planned something slower, quieter, surgical. First, I reached out to my old government contact again, the one who'd helped me trace their flight. I told him I needed more than just paper evidence this time. I wanted their accounts frozen. Offshore or not, every bank has vulnerabilities, and every secure identity has cracks. A small team of people I trusted began combing through the Cayman account linked to both their names. It turned out David had made the amateur mistake of tying it to a shell company he'd registered under his real name 2 years ago. That was all I needed to bring the whole thing down. Next came the fake identities. I made anonymous tips to multiple embassies, a breadcrumb trail pointing to potential human trafficking suspects matching their fake passports. Once that kind of flag gets attached to your name, international travel becomes nearly impossible without triggering a secondary inspection. But I wasn't satisfied with just cutting off their exits. I wanted them uncomfortable. So I went to work on their safe little Cascais bubble. A day later, I anonymously tipped off the local property manager that the tenants in the beachfront unit might be subletting without permission and could be tied to fraud. I knew that building had zero tolerance for trouble. By the time the manager showed up for a random inspection, I'd already planted a few damning items in their apartment during my earlier break-in, things that, in the wrong context, would scream illegal activity. A second set of passports. A ledger with vague transactions in the thousands. Even a burner phone preloaded with suspicious messages. The beauty was, it all looked like they'd left it there themselves. Meanwhile, I kept watching them. I'd sit at the marina with a newspaper or blend into the crowd at the market, noting every subtle shift in their behavior. On the fourth day, I saw it, the first crack in their confidence. Rachel looked over her shoulder twice, and David kept his phone glued to his ear. That night, they didn't go to their favorite restaurant. They ordered in. I smiled to myself. Pressure works slowly, like heat under glass. Eventually, something breaks. The real ace up my sleeve, though, was the footage. I'd spent my early days in Lisbon installing a discreet camera in their hallway. I now had crystal-clear video of them leaving the apartment with stacks of cash and bags of jewelry, all dated after the supposed kidnapping. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the bank withdrawals I'd tracked earlier. I packaged it all neatly, the video, the financial records, the staged kidnapping emails, the burner phone logs. Then I sent it, anonymously, to a journalist I knew specialized in high-profile fraud cases. Within 48 hours, whispers started circulating in the local press about an American couple under investigation for a multi-country financial scam. Rachel and David's paradise was shrinking, and they didn't even know the walls were closing in from every direction. I was done being the victim. Now, I was the storm. It wasn't enough to ruin their little beachside love nest. I needed to destroy the foundation they'd built it on, the money, the fake identities, the safety net they thought would keep them untouchable. If I went straight to the Portuguese police or even Interpol, there was still a chance Rachel could spin it as a misunderstanding or worse, accuse me of stalking and harassment. With no witnesses and her crocodile tears, she could turn the tables. So instead, I planned something slower, quieter, surgical. First, I reached out to my old government contact again, the one who'd helped me trace their flight. I told him I needed more than just paper evidence this time, I wanted their accounts frozen. Offshore or not, every bank has vulnerabilities, and every secure identity has cracks. A small team of people I trusted began combing through the Cayman account linked to both their names. It turned out David had made the amateur mistake of tying it to a shell company he'd registered under his real name 2 years ago. That was all I needed to bring the whole thing down. Next came the fake identities. I made anonymous tips to multiple embassies, a breadcrumb trail pointing to potential human trafficking suspects matching their fake passports. Once that kind of flag gets attached to your name, international travel becomes nearly impossible without triggering a secondary inspection. But I wasn't satisfied with just cutting off their exits. I wanted them uncomfortable. So I went to work on their safe little Cascais bubble. A day later, I anonymously tipped off the local property manager that the tenants in the beachfront unit might be subletting without permission and could be tied to fraud. I knew that building had zero tolerance for trouble. By the time the manager showed up for a random inspection, I'd already planted a few damning items in their apartment during my earlier break-in, things that, in the wrong context, would scream illegal activity. A second set of passports. A ledger with vague transactions in the thousands. Even a burner phone preloaded with suspicious messages. The beauty was, it all looked like they'd left it there themselves. Meanwhile, I kept watching them. I'd sit at the marina with a newspaper or blend into the crowd at the market, noting every subtle shift in their behavior. On the fourth day, I saw it, the first crack in their confidence. Rachel looked over her shoulder twice, and David kept his phone glued to his ear. That night, they didn't go to their favorite restaurant. They ordered in. I smiled to myself. Pressure works slowly, like heat under glass. Eventually, something breaks. The real ace up my sleeve, though, was the footage. I'd spent my early days in Lisbon installing a discreet camera in their hallway. I now had crystal-clear video of them leaving the apartment with stacks of cash and bags of jewelry, all dated after the supposed kidnapping. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the bank withdrawals I'd tracked earlier. I packaged it all neatly, the video, the financial records, the staged kidnapping emails, the burner phone logs. Then I sent it, anonymously, to a journalist I knew specialized in high-profile fraud cases. Within 48 hours, whispers started circulating in the local press about an American couple under investigation for a multi-country financial scam. Rachel and David's paradise was shrinking, and they didn't even know the walls were closing in from every direction. I was done being the victim. Now, I was the storm.